Hey, good afternoon to you. Right now, 306 News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, Rob Law will be with us, Homeland Security and Immigration Director at America First Policy Institute, former Trump advisor. We will talk to him about illegal immigration and just how quickly President Trump can get it under control, even with Democrats in the country promising actual insurrections, civil war, to stop President Trump from doing that. We discuss coming up. At 4:30, Carrie Severino is here from the Judicial Crisis Network. We got to talk to her about what's going on with all these last-minute judicial nominees that the Biden administration is trying to ram through. She's got the insight into that very important story. Maggie DeBoer joins us at 5 o'clock from the Herndon Police Department. She's the chief of police there. We'll talk about an illegal alien arrested Monday in Herndon for abduction with intent to defile and rape. So much chaos affecting even our own community when it comes to the border. And Ron Johnson, the U.S. Senator, is here at 5:30 on all these confirmation battles. You can join us at 888-630-9625. 888-630-WMAL. Well, Matt Gaetz has closed the door on becoming the Attorney General of the United States after what was quickly becoming a very messy fight to make Matt Gaetz the Attorney General with a lot of opposition within Congress. Gaetz has really just kind of told it the way he sees it for a long time, and that really ticked off many members of the House. So he didn't have allies everywhere, certainly. He had definitely had enemies within Congress who were looking to eject him from the race. And we saw over the course of this past week a lot of aggression directed at him, a lot of flirting with attempting to release all of these scandalous allegations about his sex life in the past and what people should know and whether or not we're going to release these details. And oh my gosh, it's so horrible. And I went over the details yesterday with you. I won't reiterate all of them here. You can listen to them on the Vince Coglianese Show podcast. But we did go over all of the details, as Molly Hemingway captured in The Federalist, about how the United States Department of Justice not only didn't pursue charges against Matt Gaetz for all of this scandal, and they, of course, had opened an investigation and then bragged about it. Not only did they not actually charge him with anything, they thought that the sources that were bringing the information to the FBI were so untrustworthy they couldn't rely on their credibility to make any allegations like this against Gaetz. And those are the same sources that the House has been relying on in its investigation into him. But that brings us to today. Matt Gaetz was on the Hill yesterday meeting with United States senators alongside Senator J.D. Vance, incoming Vice President of the United States, trying to convince them to support his nomination, his confirmation. And he tweets out today the following: I had excellent meetings with senators yesterday. I appreciate their thoughtful feedback and the incredible support of so many. While the momentum was strong, it is clear that my confirmation was unfairly becoming a distraction to the critical work of the Trump-Vance transition. There is no time to waste on a needlessly protracted Washington scuffle. Thus, I'll be withdrawing my name from consideration to serve as Attorney General. Trump's DOJ must be in place and ready on day one. I remain fully committed to see that Donald J. Trump is the most successful president in history. I will forever be honored that President Trump nominated me to lead the Department of Justice, and I am certain he will save America, Matt Gaetz writes. President Trump responded to the news of the day. He posted to Truth Social, quote, I greatly appreciate the recent efforts of Matt Gaetz in seeking approval to be Attorney General. He was doing very well, but at the same time did not want to be a distraction for the administration, for which he has much respect. Matt has a wonderful future, and I look forward to watching all of the great things he will do. All right, so let's pause here for a moment and just think about President Trump's desire to fight. Does he have the will to fight? Well, yeah, you've seen it. You know he has the will to fight. He literally stood up after being shot and said, fight, fight, fight. The guy has a very clear sense of the battles he needs to undertake in order to not only become president of the United States now, but to help pursue his agenda, the agenda you voted for. So it's not like this guy backs down easily. That's not what happens. So what is going on here? Well, I am fully convinced this afternoon that President Trump didn't give Matt Gaetz up easily. That J.D. Vance, acting as one of President Trump's negotiators on the Hill, they didn't give him up easily. You've got United States senators, Democrats certainly, but a couple of Republicans who didn't want Gaetz to be the guy. They were actively campaigning against it. Wendell Huseba over at Breitbart, he captures this from the New York Times today. This is the reporting. And among the senators, Republican senators who were completely opposed to Matt Gaetz were, you ready for this? You're not going to be surprised by it. Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, Susan Collins of Maine, Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, and John Curtis of Utah. That's the incoming Utah senator, Mitt Romney's replacement, who apparently is exactly like Mitt Romney, John Curtis. So the New York Times reports that Gaetz told confidants that he didn't want to get into a protracted confirmation battle and delay Trump from getting his attorney general in place immediately at the start of his administration. Fine. But what was President Trump doing behind the scenes? What was he asking for? If I say, fine, I will surrender Gaetz here, what am I getting in return? And that's what I'm waiting for. In the days ahead, I want to know more about this. Well, of course I want to know. Maybe I'll never know. But I like to believe that President Trump didn't just go quietly on this, that he didn't give up easily. Gaetz disappears, perhaps in exchange for, hey, all my other nominees, hands off. And I don't mean this like I don't mean like there. I heard even at the tail end of Dan Bongino's program today, this idea that Matt Gaetz was brought in as some sort of 4D chess move, that he was brought in explicitly as a lightning rod, it's so controversial, he's going to make everybody else smooth sailing. No, nobody else is getting smooth sailing. Are you seeing the venom that they're spitting at RFK Jr.? Are you seeing they're throwing new sex allegations that the cops investigated and literally led them nowhere? No charges were ever filed. They're throwing new things against Pete Hegseth. Their appetite to destroy all of these nominees, it was not limited to Matt Gaetz. It's insatiable. They want to stop the Trump agenda, and they will do everything they can to destroy the people that he's nominating. So I don't think that Gaetz was introduced as a human shield for the rest of the nominees. I don't. But I do believe that President Trump has been working behind the scenes to say, okay, if I allow Gaetz to walk away from this, I get something big out of it. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. And my guess is, given President Trump's tendency to share information with the rest of us, he may very well tell us what that is. But we'll find out. Now, again, I point out there's 4 Republican senators who opposed Matt Gaetz and were refusing to budge on the issue. And these are the usual suspects. CNN is claiming that Gaetz withdrew from the AG nomination 45 minutes after CNN called to say that they were going to report that the ethics committee told there was a second sexual encounter between Gaetz and a 17-year-old in 2017. So CNN was in the process of whipping up another sex scandal to throw at Gaetz. And Gaetz's withdrawal came after that. That's their claim today. Now, what's next for Matt Gaetz? Well, Chad Pergram at the Fox News Channel is a student of all things congressional procedure. And it's interesting, Matt Gaetz may not actually be entirely done in the United States House of Representatives. Of course, he resigned his seat. He resigned it from the current Congress. But a new Congress is coming in January. And Matt Gaetz did win the seat this election. Listen to Chad Pergram here. The Hitchhiker's Guide to Gaetz' Status in the House and the Ethics Committee report, he writes, former Representative Matt Gaetz resigned from the House last week. That is final. The precedence of the House is once you bow out, it is done. So Gaetz cannot revoke his letter of resignation from last week. It declared he was stepping aside, quote, effective immediately. As I reported earlier, Pergram writes, Gaetz could serve in the new Congress. He was duly reelected to his seat for the new Congress to be seated on January 3rd. In his letter to the clerk of the House, Gaetz declared, quote, I do not intend to take the oath of office for the same office in the 119th Congress to pursue the position of Attorney General in the Trump administration, end quote. However, Fox is told that Gaetz would have to inform the clerk of the House that he, in fact, does intend to serve in the new Congress, if, in fact, he elects to do so. Gaetz has not signaled his future plans. That part of the Gaetz letter is not binding. Technically, the House Ethics Committee must wrap its inquiry into Gaetz by the end of this Congress at 11:59 a.m. Eastern on January 3rd. I presume that's p.m. Eastern, actually. Oh, no, maybe it is a.m. Well, whatever the case. Yeah, okay, noon, because they convene at noon. All right. However, there is precedent for the House Ethics Committee voting to carry over an inquiry from one Congress to another, so it's not unheard of that this is a done deal. The committee still wants to finish its current work. However, if Gaetz is not going to serve in the new Congress and has withdrawn his nomination for Attorney General, this likely diminishes the importance of publicly releasing the report of a former member. Yes, there may be damning information in the report, but the House usually does not release reports about former members, even though there is precedent for doing so. Moreover, the Senate Judiciary Committee isn't interested in the report now that Gaetz is not before them as the Attorney General nominee. In addition, if Gaetz does elect to serve in the House, that helps the GOP with their numbers, with Representatives Elise Stefanik and Michael Waltz, and maybe more, leaving to join the Trump administration. So, there you go. That's the update on that. And the interesting wrinkle to all of this, so as Matt Gaetz withdraws from the AG race, he leaves open the possibility that he could return to the House. But you heard Chad Pergram describing there that Gaetz may he may be tempted to withhold that detail until the year fully wraps up, because at that time, the House Ethics Committee has to wrap up its, quote, inquiry, its investigation into Gaetz. And so maybe Gaetz is hoping that he can stymie that whole thing. We will see. We will see. Also, you wonder one other thing. Who's going to be the senator from Florida who replaces Marco Rubio? Who's going to be that guy? Could that be Matt Gaetz? Is that the arrangement? Now, my faraway suspicion is that President Trump and Governor DeSantis might have to be on a little bit better terms than I think they are right now. I think DeSantis was a team player to close out the election, but I do think that primary left some very hard feelings between the two of them. And even the speculation about Laura Trump becoming the United States Senator from Florida, DeSantis put out a little statement last week where he was indicating that he's very excited to consider all sorts of people for the role, and then he listed all of the different qualifications that he expects that they have. And I think one of the sentences was a proven track record of success was the closing qualification. And I assume that that's meant to be like success in politics, success as a politician, as an elected official. So maybe that's his cute way of excluding Laura Trump from his finalists for the gig. But it is up to Ron DeSantis. I wonder what, if anything, is going on there. The only issue with that particular theory is I don't really get what leverage Trump is going to have with DeSantis. Like, hey, DeSantis, in exchange for getting rid of Gaetz as AG, would you make him senator? Like, why would DeSantis be pushing for that? I don't know if that tracks. All I'm saying is I don't think we've seen all of the contours of this yet. I don't think we've seen all of the specific things that are to come as a result of this decision today. And I really believe that there's something much deeper going on than merely Matt Gaetz saying, you know what, I'm becoming a distraction, time to go. Can't do this. All right, hold on. I've got more, including your calls coming up. All right, let's go to the phones. I've got Jeff calling in from Milton, Delaware right now on line one. Hello, Jeff. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hi, Vince. You there?
Yeah. I can hear you, Jeff.
Okay. Yeah, all right. Fell out for a minute. So, yeah, great insight. Great insight on the situation here with Matt Gaetz. It's never at face value. It's always deeper.
Yes.
So I like Josh Hawley. I don't know if he is a senator or a congressman, but that guy's a bulldog, man. I mean,
he's the senator from Missouri.
Yeah, I like him a lot, man. He goes after it, and I think he would be a great guy for that position.
Yeah, he could be really good. You know, Missouri has a Republican governor, which means that if there were a vacancy in that role, that that appointment, I believe, would come from the governor, and it would last through the next general election. I might be wrong about that. I don't know Missouri law specifically, but just a cursory glance at some of the information on this. But yeah, Josh Hawley's a name that I've definitely heard. Other names that we're hearing include Mike Davis is tweeting about this today, and Mike Davis is a great guy. He writes, Mark Paoletta, who you've heard on this program a bunch. Mark is fantastic, a great lawyer, great understanding of the Constitution, a great respect for our nation's history. He would be fantastic in that role, and we'll see. Mike also recommends Senator Mike Lee. That would be the good Utah senator, Mike Lee, to take up that role as Attorney General. Mike Lee could be really good, too. Excellent constitutionalist. And then the last guy Mike recommends is a fellow called Chris Landau, who's the former U.S. ambassador to Mexico. I'm not as familiar with Chris Landau, but if Mike likes him, that's a great opening salvo. I like that part of it. It looks like there are some good candidates out there, maybe not quite as high profile, maybe, as Matt Gaetz or as much of a lightning rod, as people say, but patriots who desperately want to fix the United States Department of Justice, which desperately needs to be fixed.
Chris Plant on his show, he described Matt Gaetz as a fun guy and a little bit of a wild man, which that could mean so many things, but he's probably a fun guy. But but anyway, man. Anyway, thanks a lot, Vince. Appreciate you. Have a great show.
Well, it takes one to know one, right? Chris Plant's a fun guy. A little bit of a wild man. Like him. Yeah. He's great. Thanks, Jeff. No, I don't even know if I think I've met Matt Gaetz. Not sure. But he will not become the next Attorney General. That's the important takeaway today. He's withdrawn himself from consideration, but I think there's something deeper going on here. I really do. I think President Trump doesn't let that one go easily. All right. Hold on. Coming up on the program, we'll be joined by Rob Law, as Democrats are now threatening to dispatch law enforcement against the United States federal government with President Trump coming into office. It sounds like a civil war to me. We'll talk about it coming up. Hey, good afternoon to you. It is now 3:35. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, we're going to be joined by Carrie Severino at 4:30 from the Judicial Crisis Network. We chat with her about these judicial appointments that the Biden administration is ramming through and the extent to which Republicans may be abdicating their responsibility to stop them. Then Maggie DeBoard is here, chief of police for the Herndon Police Department. We'll get an update on an awful crime committed by an illegal alien this week in Herndon from her. And then Senator Ron Johnson is here at 5:30. We'll talk a little bit more about all of these confirmation battles going on in the United States Senate. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Denver has a Democrat mayor called Mike Johnston, Denver, Colorado. And Newsweek reports this week that he has pledged to resist President-elect Donald Trump's proposed immigration policies, including mass deportations and the defunding of sanctuary cities. Johnston emphasized Denver's commitment to protecting, quote, undocumented residents and maintaining a sanctuary city status where immigrants can access city services without fear of deportation. Quote, we're not going to sell out those values to anyone, Johnston told a local publication called Denverite. We're not going to be bullied into changing them, he says. Tom Homan, of course, is the incoming border czar, and he's promising that he's going to crack down on all of this illegal immigration, whether it happens in a sanctuary city or not. Newsweek says Denver, however, plans to push back. Johnston said city police would not assist in federal immigration enforcement and added that the state's leadership is unlikely to allow federal forces to mobilize in Colorado. Quote, unless they were planning on bringing National Guards mobilized from Texas or Alabama to come invade Colorado, I don't know where they would find the forces to begin to do that, he says. Johnston expressed confidence that Denver residents would support these efforts, comparing potential public resistance to federal actions to the iconic 1989 Tiananmen Square protests in China. Quote, more than us having the Denver police stationed at the county line to keep them out, you would have 50,000 Denverites there, he said. It's like the Tiananmen Square moment with the rose and the gun, right? You'd have every one of those Highland moms who came out for the migrants, and you do not want to mess with them. What is this? So the Democrat mayor of Denver, Colorado, says that the state police and 50,000 Denverites are going to physically stop the federal government from enforcing federal law? Sounds kind of insurrection-y to me. I don't know about you. Joining us now to discuss all of this is Rob Law. He's a Homeland Security and Immigration Director at the America First Policy Institute and a former senior policy advisor to President Trump. Rob, good to have you with us, sir.
Good to be with you this afternoon.
It's not every day that you have a city mayor promise to use both the local cops as well as the civilian population to physically stop the federal government from enforcing the law. What am I to make of this?
I think the mayor is auditioning for higher office. He's just trying to placate the progressive left of this country. This is just complete puffery. It's absurd. Let's be clear about what sanctuary cities are. They are jurisdictions that protect dangerous criminal aliens. And so with all due respect to the mayor, I don't think that the people of Denver who are the victims, they are the direct victims of illegal alien crime, are going to be protecting their abusers, those predators. I don't think that that's going to happen. And so he can refuse to cooperate, as distasteful as that is, but he absolutely cannot obstruct the federal government from implementing federal policy. And that is exactly what immigration enforcement is. It is the prerogative of the federal government through the Donald Trump administration to enforce the law. And he's going to probably find himself behind a jail cell if he tries to obstruct ICE and those that are assisting ICE in that mission. And again, this is about, you're really going to be the champion of dangerous criminal aliens? I mean, it is incredibly extreme. And if you're a resident of Denver, you might be second guessing why it is you'd want to remain a resident there.
So we heard Tom Homan say recently that not only is he going to double the personnel involved in going into some of these sanctuary cities in order to make sure that the law is enforced, he also warned that sanctuary city Democrats could be prosecuted for violating federal law when it comes to basically aiding, abetting, and harboring illegal aliens. This seems like an area of the law that maybe we should use a little bit more when going after these sanctuary cities.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. All authorities need to be looked at because during the first Trump administration, there was the same issue. There's a large number of dangerous criminal aliens in sanctuary jurisdictions. And when you don't have that cooperation, you just cannot allow them to be immune from prosecution and immune from the enforcement of our immigration laws. And so they are absolutely guilty of harboring, and that is an offense. And just because you're a public official, you have a greater responsibility, I would say, to uphold the rule of law if you yourself are an elected official. And so I'm thrilled to hear that out of Tom Homan, and I think he means it. I know Tom, and he doesn't say things that he doesn't mean. So I think it'll just take one, and maybe the Denver mayor will be that example, and others will start to fall in line because I don't think I want to spend any time behind a jail cell for protecting criminal aliens.
Another piece here that's worth citing and emphasizing is Tom Homan has been trying to clarify a lot of the left-wing hysteria about the role that the military might play in all of this. It's not, it's not unheard of for the military to insist in border enforcement efforts or in other things within the country. They just can't be used as actual law enforcement, right? I mean, the point is that the military would come in a support role, whether that's transportation or administration. Meanwhile, that frees up the actual Border Patrol agents and ICE agents to do their jobs. Do I have that right, Rob?
Absolutely right. And this has been done before, so it's not that novel. And the hysterics from the media, you think they would look back on how they misrepresented President Trump's first term, how they've misrepresented the immigration issue for years and years and years, and see that the American people gave President Trump an enormously clear mandate to secure the border and enforce our immigration laws. So mass deportations are only controversial to the far left media. The reality is mass deportations are required because the Biden-Harris administration allowed mass illegal immigration over 4 years. And so really, you're not seeing President Trump and his administration come up with new laws unilaterally. They're just simply going to actually apply the laws that are on the books. And when you really simplify it to that matter, you realize that it's actually been administrations like the Biden-Harris administration, like the Obama administration, and others before then, who they're the ones that are extreme and radical for ignoring the laws.
Yes.
And that's what the reality is.
Yeah, and for crafting new ways for foreign nationals to pour into our country, like via an app, for instance, the CBP1 app. You just fill out some information, and the Biden administration will traffic you in. That's the way that they've been conducting business. But just to dwell on the point of the use of the military, the Biden administration has deployed active duty personnel to serve in support roles for Customs and Border Protection. So this is not, they've done that with thousands of National Guard personnel to our southern border to again, that in that case, it's to assist bringing all these illegals into the country. But it wouldn't be especially novel for the Trump administration to get the military helping Customs and Border Protection. They're just going to do it at a different scale.
Well, it's exactly right. And again, you rightly identified it. It's apparently permissible to use the military on the intake process, the care and intake and resettlement into American communities. But utilizing them on the outflow process, apparently that is unacceptable. And you're right. If it's appropriate to use it in one direction, it is equally appropriate to use them in the opposite direction. And really, they're just doing all of those logistical and operational things and administrative responsibilities so that every single badge and gun, boots on the ground officer can be out there doing that. It is a misuse of our understaffed ICE officers to be in an office typing up a report. There are other people that can do that type of stuff. Just let ICE do its job, and you will see deportations go up. You will see apprehensions go up. You will see dangerous criminal aliens removed from the streets, and you'll see our communities get safer. Our border will get more secure. The inflow will decrease, and you'll finally see the regaining of the sovereignty of our country.
Rob Law is on the phone with us. He's from the America First Policy Institute. Handles Homeland Security and immigration there for them. Rob, I want to ask you about this big Georgia case resolving yesterday. Jose Ibarra was found guilty of the assault and murder of Laken Riley, and he's been sentenced to life in prison without parole. All of that, just a completely heartbreaking scene in the courtroom yesterday as Laken Riley's family was speaking up ahead of the sentencing, just about the daughter that they had lost. Now, just to go over the details again on some of the basics, Jose Ibarra entered near El Paso, Texas back in September of 2022, was taken into custody by the Biden administration, instantly paroled and released for, quote, further processing. About a year later, in August of 2023, he's arrested by the New York City Police Department and charged with, quote, acting in a manner to injure a child less than 17 and a motor vehicle license violation. The next month, he's flown at federal taxpayer expense into Georgia, and it's in February that the man we now know as a Venezuelan gang member, Jose Ibarra, that he brutally murders Laken Riley when she goes out for a morning jog. And that brings us to today. As you look at this case, how many preventable moments do you see along the way?
Frankly, I lost count, and it's so tragic. This was, of all of the illegal alien crime that was preventable, this might be just the clearest example. Laken Riley was failed time and time and time again, and it all started with the catch and release policies at the southern border. Her murderer is not one of the 1.8 million gotaways who successfully evaded the Border Patrol, found his way into the country, and then came about Laken Riley and murdered her in a very grotesque and brutal way. This was somebody that was in Border Patrol custody and was ordered released because of the reckless policies of open borders and catch and release. There is no way those Border Patrol agents wanted to release this guy. He was unvetted. They had no idea who he was. And if they had detained him, which is what the law requires, they would have figured out, obviously he's here unlawfully. He crossed the border. And then you would have figured out that he's a member of a Venezuelan gang and you would have had him detained and deported. That's exactly what would have happened under the Trump administration. And yet it was essentially an open invitation. And then you had these failed progressive prosecutors that refused to enforce certain civil laws and other criminal laws as well. They downgrade offenses as well with the goal of getting criminals back onto the streets. And all that does is enable them and embolden them to commit more and more and more heinous crimes. And that's exactly what you saw here. You know, it started with one level of offense, then another, and at each of those instances, he should have either been in Border Patrol, ICE custody, or should have been in New York custody or, Athens, Georgia custody. He should not have been out on that path when she went for that run that morning.
But just the final insult in terms of the federal government's involvement here is that they paid for his flight from New York to Georgia. They sent him to the location of the murder right after he came out of jail in New York. What makes me worried is that this is a high-profile case that we're all aware of because of the loss of life, because we lost Laken Riley. But how many other cases like this are there all across the country that we're not aware of?
Oh, there's so many, and obviously there's been a few more tragic examples like Jocelyn Ngari and Rachel Marin, things of that sort. And so, like, while Laken Riley sort of captured the media attention, that was not a one-off. There have been instances of this for numerous years, and frankly, another reason that we don't really know the full extent of it is there are so many of these jurisdictions that refuse to disclose the immigration status of the perpetrator, of the murderer, the rapist, the arsonist, the thief, whatever the case may be. And so the actual problem is probably leaps and bounds worse than even we realize that it is.
Yeah, we have a very dishonest media that doesn't want to tell us the truth about any of this. And in fact, I saw some headlines, I don't have them in front of me, but they're attacking Republicans for bringing so much attention to Laken Riley's murder, when, of course, one of the critical reasons Trump was just reelected was because people don't want to see that happen anymore, and that's why they brought him back. It's the most obvious thing in the world, but the media doesn't want you to know that. Rob Law from America First Policy Institute. Sir, thank you for your time today. Good to talk to you.
Appreciate it. Have a good one.
That's Rob Law, and he's a former senior policy advisor to President Trump. If you can believe it, the White House press briefing continues. What are they up to over there? Well, even CNN's MJ Lee wants to know why they aren't talking about Trump as an existential threat to the country anymore. Whatever happened to that? Here's MJ Lee raising it to cringe.
But separate from just the trip itself, it's been more than 2 weeks since the election. This was an election that elected a man that President Biden has repeatedly referred to as an existential threat. So why is it that the American people have not heard President Biden talk about this threat since the election?
Because he's old and feeble, not very good at constructing sentences, and we were lying.
Because there was an election and the American people spoke. Mm-hmm. The will of the American people were very clear. Right? And so
I think we call that democracy.
The president is now in a situation where we have to deal with a peaceful transfer of power. We have to respect the will of the American people. And that's what you have been seeing from this president, trying to lead by example to make sure that...
Respect the will. They're trying to start a nuclear war with Russia right now. They really respect your will.
That happens. And that's what the American people deserve. That's what the president deserves. And that's what I think he was very clear about in Rose Garden when he delivered his remarks 2 days after the election. And he said, he was very honest. He said, these, and again, I'm not quoting him exactly, but these were not the results that we had wanted, right? And that's just being honest. They weren't.
That's just being honest.
But we are now in a position where he believes he has to lead by example and show what a peaceful transfer of power looks like. Mm-hmm. And so that's what you're seeing from this president. And, to the points that you made, I've been asked about existential threat. I've been asked about threat to our democracy. The president is always going to be honest with the American people. He feels like he is obligated. What he said still stands. But we are now in a different place.
Yeah.
We are. The American people spoke.
It's not the campaign anymore, so we don't have to lie about it.
They deserve a peaceful transfer of power. That's what this president wants to do.
Does he have a message for people on what they should do about this existential threat?
How do we prepare for the threat to democracy when he arrives in January?
Assuming that he still believes Donald Trump is an existential threat.
Look, his thoughts and what he said, his thinking on that has not changed. It has not. And
he's as empty-headed as ever. Hey, coming up, Carrie Severino's going to join us in the next hour. We will chat with her about all of these judicial appointments that the left is ramming through right now. And the weak fight that some Republican senators are putting up against it. Carrie gives us the details. A lot more ahead on the Vince Coglianese Show.